Hey guys, welcome back to Hyrule Park, where I am building a theme park based on The Legend of Zelda in Planet Coaster 2. In this video, we continue on with building out the Lost Woods area. So far, we have an entrance, obviously. Kokiri Forest, kid-friendly area, complete with a Deku Scrub themed coaster, and Link's house from Ocarina of Time. And then in last episode, we built out the Great Deku Tree as a restaurant, which I'm super proud of. So if you haven't seen any of those yet, you should definitely go check them out. And if you have, and you're one of those gems who have left comments or liked or joined the channel from one of these recent videos, you're awesome and thank you. It means a whole hell of a lot. It's been really cool to see the engagement in reading the comments that are coming through recently. So again, thank you. Super appreciate that. So yeah, for this one, we're moving to the back of this Lost Woods area and starting the Forest Temple Dark Ride that I'm building. I think I mentioned last episode that that's what I was going to start next, and I held true to that. And this is part one of what I assume will be a two-part build. But yeah, we'll see how easy the animatronics I plan on building come together. So maybe it'll be 3 parts, but yeah, I imagine and I hope my goal is to have part 2 be the final build of this ride. And this, what you're seeing here, is not the Forest Temple, obviously, not yet. Before I got there, I felt like I had to work on first fleshing out the area just in front of the Great Deku Tree, and then also the transition paths from the Deku Tree Courtyard area into the back half where the Forest Temple is going to live. And yeah, so when I was editing that last episode, the Deku Tree restaurant build, I could not get past the amount of guests walking around doing that, like, gotta pee dance, you know? Like, it was virtually every group of guests that came through the camera, they would be clearly needing a bathroom, so I felt like I had to accommodate and build a bathroom before anything else here, so I didn't have to continue seeing that. Although it still didn't work, I'm still seeing that as I build. I think it's just a perpetual issue that I'll have to deal with. And yeah, I was actually pretty proud of this little building shell too, so I wanted to show that off. The goal with this was obviously to really blend it in, so it felt like it really belonged to the Lost Woods, not just some bathroom building slapped down into the Lost Woods. So I wanted to use a lot of, you know, the old stone look, the old wood tones with moss and vines growing in and around it. So yeah, this was a cool one, not using any grid pieces and making it work so that it's even all around in terms of like wall length and dimensions and whatnot, with a lot of just freehand placement of the pieces, if you will. And I sort of remembered back in one of the first episodes of this series when I built this Triforce statue that I said I was going to try to find a way to incorporate it into every area in some way. And I kind of completely forgot about that until I was building this, and I thought it could be a cool touch to put on the front of the bathroom facility. You know, have that Triforce there and recolor it to match the old stone look, so the Triforce is back in the Lost Woods after a long hiatus. But as I usually do when it comes to building buildings, I struggled with the roof for this one. I ended up using the bark pieces for that to build a custom roof to really drive home that Lost Woods deep in the forest type of vibe that I was going for. I wasn't feeling any of the roof pieces in the library that the game gives you, and those were really made for the grid anyway, so it wasn't really working out for the build that I was going for. So yeah, I went ahead and tried to build a custom roof for this. Like I said, it did give me some issues for sure, but I do love how it came out. I'm pretty proud of it. And this is up in the workshop too now if you want to use it for any of your projects. But moving on, yeah, after going through the Deku Tree build last episode, these bark pieces that I didn't even realize I had access to in the game, they've just become one of my most used pieces, and I thought it could be cool to give it another go and redo the old log tunnels to make it fit the area better, make it more consistent to what I've already built, and add a bit more realism and depth to them. More so for sure than my original ones, which I'm pretty sure I created like over a year ago now. And definitely happy I did, because these ones came out so much more convincing than the other ones in my opinion. So I'll end up switching out the old ones for this new version across the whole area at some point, and maybe by the time this is published, I will have already done that. But yeah, that's sort of the goal I had at the outset of this build, was to really ground the area from the Deku Tree Courtyard into a transition into the back half of the Lost Woods and just make things really seamless and built up. And per usual, most of my inspiration for this build is coming from Ocarina, and because of that I had to have an ode to the Lost Woods maze out behind Kokiri Forest, you know, where they have the 3 branching paths and you have to follow the music to choose the right path, if you remember that. So that's what I was going for with this build, or with this part of the build I should say. And one thing I'm still trying to get better at is planning out footprints in you know, just entire areas, and planning ahead better, so I have the room that I need, and probably more so I don't overcompensate and have too much room to fill, because then that gets kind of ugly pretty quick. Definitely getting better as I go. Goron City, I think I made way too big at the start, like I mentioned in those episodes, and I learned from that for sure. But that to say, I was really starting to think hard about where exactly to place these, knowing that on the other side it would be sort of a sub area to the Lost Woods, not just strictly for the Forest Temple. Like I definitely want a couple flat rides, concessions, and stalls and whatnot to fill that area as well as the Forest Temple. And if I did end up having room, which knowing where I'm at as it currently stands, I don't think I will, but if I do, I was thinking of doing another coaster that sort of went through and interacted with the back half of the Lost Woods that we'll get to in a little bit, and then the Deku Tree itself. I don't know if that'll work out though, so we shall see. And now we get to the first, I think it's the first in this series, the first animatronic that I attempt to build. This will be a preview for part 2 of this episode, where I'm planning on creating more animatronics for the Dark Ride to fit the Forest Temple. But anyways, yeah, this is my first go. You guys gotta let me know how it looks to you. I think it passes. If you don't know what I'm building, I'm building, how do you pronounce it? Kaepora Gaebora from Ocarina and other games. Again, I'm going off of the Ocarina feel and inspired by Ocarinas, and he's hanging out at the beginning of the Lost Woods maze in that game, so I feel like I had to throw him in there. I've tried to build him in the past, and the pieces were convincing enough, I guess, at that point, but I wanted to give it another go and see if I could do a little bit better. Again, let me know what you guys think, if this resembles the owl, which, by the way, just my opinion, but I think he has like sneaky the best theme in any Zelda game. I think his song is just the best, but that's besides the point. Yeah, it took a lot of tweaking and messing around with these like sandbag pieces, I don't even know what they're called, to get the shape of the head and the colors right. I also tried to animate the head to do like that circle thing that he does in the game, if you remember that. As of now, I don't have it, because I couldn't get it to look quite right, but I'll keep messing with it and see what I can do. But for now, yeah, it's just a little Easter egg, I guess, at the edge of the Lost Woods, or at least of the edge of this part of the Lost Woods, I should say. So yeah, like I said, let me know what you think. Right now, you'll see the eyeballs are just like kind of goofy until you see me move the little eyebrow wing things on the top of his head. I was just messing with different pieces to see what's gonna fit, what's gonna actually be scalable to the size that I need to be to make it convincing. The good thing is it'll be up high, so hopefully, you know, from a distance it'll get the point across. And yeah, but anyways, I had to do it, and here it is. It actually kind of looks like a penguin at certain points. So if I ever go for a project that's like in the winter time and I need some like penguin ride, I know how to do it. So that's good, if nothing else. All right, and one last piece of the puzzle to wrap up in the Deku Tree Courtyard area before jumping over to the Forest Temple. Again, I didn't want to just leave this spot unfinished, so that's why I'm still working on it here, the courtyard that is, before jumping over to the Forest Temple, especially while, you know, it was still fresh in my mind from the last episode. Yeah, forgive me for kind of burying the lead of the video here. Timestamps are in the description if you want to just skip over to the Forest Temple, that's totally fine. But hoping you guys get some cool ideas and inspiration from this at least. But yeah, before I had this courtyard, and I keep calling it that, a courtyard, not sure if it really constitutes a courtyard, but for lack of a better term at the moment, I'm gonna keep calling it that. I had it sort of just like a wide open, milling around big area for guests originally, but as I kept coming back to it, I thought it needed like a center point feature to break it up a bit and make it more interesting. And this being the Lost Woods, I didn't want to go with some like ornate feature, so I opted to go for sort of like an old overgrown sword pedestal instead, which I think fits the area pretty well. Ended up reusing the pedestal that I had built in the Temple of Time episode that housed the Master Sword, and instead of making it this big reveal as it was with that, with the Master Sword, it's instead meant to be, you know, like a relic of the past that has been forgotten. So that's kind of the vibe I was going for with this one. So yeah, just a little feature that I think adds a finished look to this spot of the park. Okay, here we go. The feature of the episode. Let's start on the Forest Temple now. Ocarina still was the inspiration for this build, so absolutely knew how I wanted this temple to look and feel like. The hard part for me was understanding and trying to grasp how much real estate I was going to need to fit a large enough dark ride track layout to be able to theme it in a way that I really wanted to theme it as. and include all of the Easter eggs and different elements that I'm planning for it. But I also wasn't ready to build out the whole track layout yet, so I sort of went back and forth with myself between terraforming and just going forward with the building and laying out of at least, you know, a draft of the track and then go with the building. So that's sort of what you're seeing here in this early stage, me battling myself and second guessing things in terms of where and how I wanted to build and orient this ride. But ultimately this is the sort of footprint I'm allowing myself to work with, and I think you'll see in the end it works out pretty well. Now, will I have to make tweaks when I go and get to the actual ride theming part? Most likely yes, but hoping it won't be too major in terms of the changes needed. For now, it's a great jumping off point for the build, I think. I decided to go with the stone ruin wall set for the temple. It's one of my favorite textures in the game in terms of grid pieces for sure. And I think the colors you can get from this texture fit what I was going for in terms of look and feel, so I immediately started building with that. I knew it was the one I wanted. The parts I was a little more hesitant on and had to think about a bit more was which pieces to use in order to create like the old ruined feel, not just like having this sort of sterile, clean, flat look it gives without adding more layers on top of the grid pieces. I started with the marble pieces at first. I think it's actually referred to as a temple piece in the game or something along those lines. And I did end up using those pieces in parts of the temple, but it didn't always give me the look I wanted, unfortunately. So it's just a bit too smooth and shiny, and it's marble, not stone, right? So in certain lighting it can really stand out as not belonging with the rest of the stone pieces that I'm using. I hope in a upcoming content pack that Frontier gives us more like ruined stone pieces off the grid, freeform, instead of the marble. I think that would be super versatile. A lot of getting more like intricate in this game with building I found is combining different sets together. That seems obvious when I put it like that, but meaning like here with the columns, like I like the sort of finishes and whatnot of the Sorcerer's Keep pillars, but the texture didn't completely play nice with the stone wall pieces that I'm using. So I used the freeform stone ruin pieces and layered it on top of the Sorcerer's Keep pillar to get the best of both worlds. So yeah, combining pieces together is a huge part of getting things to look how you want them to in the end, and not coming away with like that super flat build, if you know what I mean, which is definitely something I see from my older builds. If I look back, like a lot of it was just flat and seemingly like uninspired. And yeah, I think at that point I was just getting used to the game more so than truly understanding how to manipulate the different pieces and add more depth and realism. So that's totally fine for that stage. That's what building these projects are meant for, right? Like just continuing to improve. But now that I've put enough hours in and I sort of have somewhat of a grasp of how to build and make things a little bit interesting in the game, I just tend to try to combine as much as I can, without going overboard, of course, but just to make it a bit more interesting and add depth to it. I keep saying that, but for me, that's a huge part of these builds. There were a few times during this recording of the episode where I thought I had hit record when I was building and trying to capture footage, and got to the end of a build session, and realized I didn't hit record. So swears under my breath were definitely said in those instances to myself. But yeah, I apologize if any of this sort of jumps ahead without showing some of the steps to get there. I guess I got to be more mindful of that going forward. I tend to just autopilot the record shortcut on the keyboard and assume it worked. but yeah, sometimes it doesn't. Anyways, I think getting that front part of the temple was the hardest part. It sort of set the tone for the rest of the building, and you know, I could borrow ideas and elements from that in these like outer wings and the rest of the temple and whatnot, and it gave me a template to sort of work off of too. So yeah, getting that front entrance done really helped the rest come together pretty easily. This is also the part where I sort of go off script from the Ocarina Forest Temple reference, in that like it's super enclosed and walled in the Ocarina game, and I didn't think I wanted that for this because it just would have looked sort of jarring, I think, and would have not allowed me to preserve the sight lines that I wanted for this as you walk back here. I assume the game did that way back in the day because of the limitations of the system in cartridge and how much memory it could hold, so I had to create like small rooms instead of this big open vast space. At least not in every part of the game. Like Hyrule Field is pretty open in that game. Anyways, I'm getting off topic. So yeah, definitely with the rest of this, taking some creative liberties with how I round it out and finish the structure, but definitely hoping that it's keeping the Ocarina Forest Temple vibes intact, and we'll have enough from that inspiration to play it off as that. And I guess this staircase here that I'm working on is an example of that. I guess my thought process was, you know, in that game in Ocarina, and it's been years and years since I played through Ocarina, but I seem to remember having to, was it like climbing the vines up the wall to get to a chest on top of the tree to get a key? I don't know, something like that. I seem to remember the right side of the entrance you had to scale the wall to eventually gain access into the temple. So my thought process here, since I wasn't going to go for that one-to-one creation of having that enclosed area where, you know, the wall would be there, where it's obvious that, you know, this is the wall that you had to scale in game to get access to the temple. So in lieu of that, I decided, how would Nintendo have filled in that space had they had more powerful systems to work with back then? And this is my take on that, I guess. I don't know. This is just kind of what goes through my head when I'm trying to think of how to fill in spaces, because like I said, I'm not going for a one-to-one representation of anything in the game for the most part. I mean, there might be some things here and there that I'm doing, like I guess Kokiri Forest was that, so that's a lie. But for the most part, I'm trying to do my own take on the feel of Zelda games and fit it into a theme park. All this to say is just a long-winded way of saying, like, there are creative liberties that I'm taking in these builds, and I at least have some sort of like grounding to the actual game itself that I'm getting inspiration from when I come up with these ideas. Yeah, I guess just a little look inside old Biko's head as I'm building and thinking of ideas. So there you go. And this part here I didn't have plans for. Really, it was just going to be another thing like the staircase, where it didn't really have a purpose outside of like setting the scene and filling the immersion, which I guess is a really big purpose when you think about it. I don't mean to say it didn't have a purpose at all. I guess what I really mean to say is it wasn't really intended to have a function outside of, you know, theming. But when I get to the queue later on in the episode and laying that out, I actually utilize this as sort of like an underground passage into the temple, or that's what it's meant to look like anyway. So the queue will go underneath, and the way I create these arched doorways is I use this perspective manipulation technique. Totally just made that term up. I'm sure there's a proper term for what I'm trying to convey here. But I wanted to make it seem as if you're looking through these archways, you're seeing that it clearly is an entryway underneath the temple. So, and I don't want to take credit for this idea either. This is actually something that I saw in the workshop when I was building out the Goron mine coaster. There was a spot that I was trying to fill, and I saw a kind of like mine shaft build in the workshop, and it was utilizing this perspective technique. Kudos to that creator. I'll throw the creator code up here because that was a really cool idea, and it gave me an idea for this little spot. So there you go. Something I was drawing inspiration from in terms of like the direction of this spot in front of the temple, outside of Ocarina of course, was the Haunted Mansion and how they have this really like themed up and immersive front lawn type deal. So not necessarily like the ride or the story behind the mansion, obviously this is totally different than that, but the idea of the front lawn being part of the experience. Like when you walk past the Haunted Mansion at Disney, that space alone feels like an experience. At least to me, it's layered, it's atmospheric. It already puts you in the mindset of what's coming next, sort of. So that's kind of what I wanted this area in front of the Forest Temple to do. Obviously, thematically, it's completely different, like I said. But I wanted this courtyard, there I go using that term again, to feel less than just a transition type space to the temple. I wanted it to be something that feels mysterious, overgrown, and really like it's a continuation of the temple's presence, if you know what I mean. So even if you're not hopping on the ride, I wanted it to be the kind of place where you walk by and think, yeah, this is a cool thing just to take in. And I think that's what I get most out of this game, honestly, in creating in it. Because I've said before, I'm not a huge like ride attraction person. I love going to theme parks for the immersive experience you get more so than the thrill. Although since I've started playing Planet Coaster, I feel like I'm like itching to go on more rides and coasters next time I get out to a theme park. And actually my kids have been watching some of the POVs of like my Goron coaster and then some other creator POVs recently on YouTube. And they've suddenly been asking me if they can go on a real roller coaster one day. They're only 4-year-old twins and a 2-year-old, so they've got a little bit. But yeah, I think maybe this midlife stage I'm in right now, I'll become a coaster type of guy. I don't know. I also don't remember what I was getting at. Oh yeah, and so that's what I really get out of the game. It's a rewarding thing to think of how I can theme up a space in the park to really get that immersion across. So builds like this I love doing. It's super fun for me and rewarding. And yeah, that's why I gravitate so hard towards this game, and so much so that I've completely abandoned basically all of my other gaming habits for a while now. I spend all my gaming time in the park because it gives me the space to really like slow down and really put creative thought into these projects. It's a great stress reliever, that's for sure. But yeah, I mean, moments like this area are what I remember most when I go to real parks in real life. The in-between spaces, the transitions, the stuff that just sort of quietly pulls you into the world you're walking through without even realizing it. So when working on something like this Forest Temple Courtyard, I'm mostly thinking about mood and textures and how long someone might be able to linger out front here and take it in, and making sure it feels natural to the rest of the surrounding area too, that sort of thing. Like I don't want it to stand out like a sore thumb. I want it to blend in but also stand out in a good way, if that makes sense. So yeah, nailing that part of a build is for me more rewarding than say like nailing a perfect ride layout. Okay, story time is over. Back to the build process. So while I mentioned earlier I did not want to go with the completely enclosed idea that the Forest Temple actually has in game in Ocarina, I did still want to have the idea of those walls somewhere, just in a more open concept. So that's what I'm doing here, and it actually serves the purpose of sort of blocking out the back of the queue line as well as like the parking lot side of this area. So it definitely helps to lock in the immersion, I think. And you also may have noticed I had to clear some trees from the parking lot border because I had to put the queue there, and actually the first part of the track will be going around the outside area there. I think what I want to do with that space is kind of have that first scene of the dark ride be on the outside, and it'll be like the Skull Kid scene in Ocarina where he's standing on the log and playing his ocarina. So yeah, this is another reason that the walled off section is good. It keeps that scene separate, or it will keep that scene separate once I build it. It'll also be a cool like last view of people waiting in line, since the last part of the queue goes by that spot too. So, and I couldn't build the Forest Temple without having these two like dead trees out front either. That had to be something I pulled from the actual Forest Temple to keep things like canon. It's a subtle detail, or maybe not so subtle detail, and in the game it sort of like frames the temple entrance, so I definitely had to have that. And like I said earlier, it plays a huge role in how to enter the temple in the game. So yeah, I had to have it in here. So again, I might not be creating this one-to-one, but I definitely am wanting to have familiar shapes and like silhouettes to be there. So subconsciously, I'm hoping it'll bring you into the Ocarina scene, the Ocarina headspace. That's my hope anyway. Then from here, I wanted to make sure I didn't just have a flat front area. I like to try to keep in mind the idea of adding elevation changes that look natural. They aren't just like sudden spikes in elevation or dips or whatever. But also, yeah, if it was just completely flat, I don't think it would create the same effect. It would just be too sort of boring and unnatural looking. So creating these sort of terraces, is that what you call this? That's the idea there. And then another subtle detail that I don't like to skip over is just adding in some other textures to the grass, some soil. So again, it looks more natural and not all just like one color. And here we go. Here's the first draft of the track layout now that I have the front of the show building almost completed. And in terms of footprint, it is complete at this point in the build. I thought it was a good idea to try out a track layout in the space that I gave myself to work with. But just like the terraforming and footprint portion of this temple build, I'm gonna leave myself some leeway in terms of like making tweaks and whatnot once I get to the room building phase of this ride. But I at least was able to ease my concern of not being able to fit a track in the space. Using the track to go up and down different floors obviously helps keep it contained inside the footprint that I gave myself, but yeah, I think I ended up giving myself more than enough room for this, honestly. But again, that might change once I get to the theming phase. So I have a bunch of ideas for this ride. I won't give away anything now. Just again, going to take a lot of inspiration and elements from the Forest Temple in Ocarina and try to incorporate it into the dark ride. We shall see how it goes, but I think it's going to be really cool when I complete it. So having the track out of the way and knowing again that I was able to fit it in here was one of the last big check boxes to mark off for the build. The last one being the queue and how I was gonna weave that in a way that wasn't messy and made sense for what I was going for. Outside of that, I start to add in the layers of detail like moss decals, the lighting, of course, needed to dial that in for night shots. Eventually, I'll start putting on some of the wall damage decals and recoloring them to match the stone that I used. I'd always recommend exploring those decals, by the way. It adds a ton of realism to builds, and I think it just brings everything together. I'd honestly like to see some other decal options too in the future from Frontier. That would be cool. But for now, these ones definitely get us by. And then finally, this is where I realized that this little archway spot that I was building earlier could have a cool purpose with the queue. So I didn't want to mess with the perspective manipulation thing that I used earlier and have the queue go through the arches. I wanted to keep that intact, and instead I ended up building the queue to go right in between and underground below the arches. So it's still playing off that idea that there is this underground pathway into the temple. I'm not looking forward to having to theme down in there because I tend to have issues with camera controls in those tight spaces. I'm definitely a console gamer at heart, so mouse and keyboard are still not as intuitive as I'd like them to be. I think it's going to end up adding another layer to the immersion once that queue is complete. And then the last bit of this part one of the build is going to be the ride sign. I knew for this I wanted to do sort of like a logo type sign. I guess it doesn't really end up being a logo, but kind of like a statue sort of vibe rather than just having like a hanging sign with the ride name above the queue. I really wanted this to be a big feature of the park, this ride that is, so I thought it justified that. I may end up tweaking this one as I go as well, but for a first pass at the sign, I'm pretty happy with how it pulls off the vibe I was going for, and I think it keeps within like the confines of how I went with the rest of the build. It looks like it belongs. But yeah, guys, the footage is winding down here. Stick around to the end though, because I've got some finished shots of the area to show off. And yeah, next time we'll get into the actual dark ride portion. I'm definitely open to ideas for that too. So if anyone has an idea of what to incorporate as a scene or an animatronic, I can try my hand out for that part. Drop those suggestions in the comments. I'm happy to take anything into consideration and see what I can do. But yeah, thanks for watching this far. If you made it, I appreciate you. Please leave a like on the way out. Please subscribe if you're not already. That would help me out getting the algorithm to cooperate. But yeah, anyway, guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you in part 2. Bye-bye.